Hello, everybody, and good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. And welcome to part one of our two-part series, Inspiring Best Practices for Improving the Attendance of Students Experiencing Homelessness. My name is Ana Sofia Treyes. I'm a K-12 Senior Program Manager here at SchoolHouse Connection, and I'm here to just do some introductions. I will share a housekeeping slide, and then I will turn it over to my colleagues to go through our content and talk to our lovely panelists. So just a quick housekeeping slide. So want to remind everybody that today's webinar should last 90 minutes. We have a Q&A box in your control panel on Zoom. And we just request that if you have any questions, which I'm sure you will have many, please to type them in the Q&A box. There's obviously a lot going on in the chat. Sometimes folks want to introduce themselves, and we want to make sure that we can see your questions. So please put them into the Q&A box on Zoom. This session is being recorded, and you will have access to the recording after today's webinar, and you will be issued a certificate of attendance for participating in today's webinar. And the last thing that I will share is that SchoolHouse Connection has a community on Slack where you all can connect with each other, whether you're a McKinney Vento liaison or an attendance professional. We want you all to continue today's conversation even after we have wrapped up here today. And with that, I will turn it over to Hetty Chang, Executive Director of Attendance Works, to keep us moving forward.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We are so pleased that you could join us here today. I wanted to first just make sure that you knew what you're in for. We're going to make sure that you understand and think about the intersection of chronic absenteeism and homelessness and why it matters. We hope you'll come away with discovering new effective strategies from school districts that have increased attendance for students experiencing homeless. And they may not be new in the world, but maybe they're new to you. And you'll learn about some interactive data profiles for tracking chronic absenteeism among students experiencing homelessness in your community and state. And if we go to the next slide, I want to make sure that you know this is building off all of these resources that we have recently released and published. There are a summary of key strategies, 4 in-depth case studies, and we're going to hear from a number of the districts from those case studies today, 6 more best practices, and youth voices. And if you go to the chat, you'll see this webpage, which you can bookmark so you can easily find this. And with that, I want to invite Chris Graham, the chairman of the Imagine Learning Foundation, whose resources made production of all these materials and this webinar possible. Chris.
Thank you, Hetty, and thank you all for coming, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to be part of this great project. I'm Chris Graham. I'm the Senior Vice President of Imagine Learning, and I'm also the Chairman of the Imagine Learning Foundation. Imagine Learning, you've probably heard of. We're a leading digital-first education company. 18 million students use our materials. We're in over half the school districts nationwide. We have core curriculum, Imagine IM Math and Twig Science, supplemental curriculum, Imagine Language and Literacy, and we have a whole host of other products. But in 2021, at the height of the pandemic, Imagine Learning saw people struggling and suffering and wanted to do something not related to our business to kind of help out with some of the problems were there. So we formed Imagine Learning Foundation, which is a separate philanthropic initiative of the company with a simple but a really powerful mission. Our mission is to foster the well-being of learners and the people who support them at home and in their communities. So we're looking to benefit students and their families and their support systems outside of the classroom. We funded a lot of great programs over our short life cycle. We've been funding student clubs to combat suicide and organizations that educate students in schools about mental health and trying to eliminate the stigma of mental health issues, and educating children and families regarding how to deal with grief, one of the big traumas that holds back education. So a lot of cool causes. And in 2024, one cause rose to the forefront of our attention, which was chronic absenteeism, which has really exploded since the pandemic. And as everybody on this call knows, kids need to be in school to learn. They need to be in school to make up lost ground. And we decided that that was what we would focus on in 2024. So we received many applications, deserving applications, over 150. And we funded organizations doing things like basic needs, Katie's Closet, opening schools, stores and schools where kids can get free clothes and shoes so they can come to school, or giving the basics, where we're doing simple things like funding toiletries so kids can have good hygiene and come to school. But one application really jumped off the page, and that's why we're here today. That was an opportunity to join a partnership between two great organizations, SchoolHouse Connection and Attendance Works. And they said, you know, we want to do a national study, and we want to figure out what school districts are doing to combat chronic absenteeism, particularly in the homeless community where it's hit worst. And then we want to take that information and we want to share it with other people so that everybody can benefit from what we're doing. Well, we've seen some advance information about the work they've done. It's amazing, it's practical, it's implementable, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about it today. We're really, really proud at the foundation to have been part of this, and we're committed to this cause. We just opened up our 2025 grant cycle, and we're continuing our focus on chronic absenteeism, and we're planning on giving away $600,000 this year. So if people know of organizations that are aligned with our mission and this cause, please encourage them to attend. And Hetty, I'm really looking forward to jumping into the attendance and hearing what you have today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Again, this work would not be possible without the support of you and the Imagine Learning Foundation. So the next day, we're going to actually have a chance for me and Barbara. So this is a collaboration of two organizations to talk a little bit about why we thought this collaboration and this issue area was so important. So this is a little bit about Attendance Works and we also, by the way, believe that we have people in the audience, some who know homeless. The kids, they really focus on the issues, the strategies, the resources for helping kids who are struggling with homeless, and other folks who are part of the attendance world and who've been working to try to reduce chronic absence. And what we think is part of the power of our work is we're bringing together both audiences that are possibly not working together and should be working together and thinking together. And you'll see why that's so important. Actually, that's one of the highlights of the different case studies, and the folks who are going to be talking about is how they figure out how to work across silos. But we believe that part of our work is our ability to bring together audiences that we may be speaking to so they can be working together. So Attendance Works, we work at the local, state, national level. We advance better policy practice, communication, and research. And if you go to the next slide, I just want to make sure that we are clear about terms, because some of you may not be as immersed in the attendance world. And there are, one of the common challenges we've seen in our work is people don't understand there are actually different terms. There's average daily attendance, which is used sometimes for funding in some places. And it actually helps you know particular days of the week, the day after Halloween, when it's not so easy for kids to show up, but it can mask chronic absence levels. There's truancy, and the laws about what makes a kid truant can vary from many, many places. And that tends to resort to legal, more blaming strategies often to get kids to school. And then there's chronic absenteeism, which is noticing when kids miss 10% or more of school. We want people to really notice the impact it has on well-being as well as academics. And it's a sign that we need to take a trauma-sensitive approach and cultivate student and family engagement so we can understand what's happening to kids in order to address that. If you go to the next slide, you can also see that chronic absence is so crucial to address because we know, first and foremost, it affects academic outcomes. It also affects social, emotional, our emotional well-being, executive functioning. And we know that when chronic absence reaches high levels, it can actually affect the learning and the well-being of all the kids in a classroom. And if you go to the next slide, what you can see is that what we found in our work is that the key to turning around chronic absence, improving attendance, is finding out and addressing what causes kids to miss school in the first place. Is it barriers, aversion, disengagement, misconceptions? We know that kids who are facing housing and food insecurity are experiencing some of the most barriers. And while I'm highlighting that as a barrier in itself, we know that it actually connects to many of the other barriers and challenges, not only in this box of barriers, but the aversion, disengagement, and the misconceptions. So, but understanding these root causes is essential to making a difference. And with that, I'd love to ask Barbara to talk about Schoolhouse Connection and why they think this work is so important.
Thank you very much, Hetty. So first, by way of introduction, for those of you who are new to Schoolhouse Connection, we're a national nonprofit organization working to overcome homelessness through early care and education. We provide advocacy at the state and federal level, but most of our team is engaged in what we call practical assistance, which is the hands-on help to help communities and schools identify and serve students experiencing homelessness. So just to pick up where Hetty left off on the next slide, we know that child and youth homelessness is largely invisible in our communities and also in our schools. Most families and youth who are homeless are out of sight. They're moving frequently. They're often staying with other people temporarily due to lack of shelter, due to fear. And that means that if school personnel aren't aware of the signs of homelessness and its relationship to attendance, they may miss a critical opportunity to intervene and provide support. So when we look at the root causes of chronic absenteeism, as Hetty mentioned, we need to keep homelessness front of mind because those school absences may well be an indicator that a child or youth does not have a safe and stable place to call home. Why does it matter? Well, Hetty made quite clear the consequences of chronic absenteeism on school readiness, academic achievement, and high school graduation, and those are particularly profound for students who are experiencing homelessness. And lastly, if we truly want to break the cycle of homelessness, truly make a dent in this national crisis, we have to prioritize education, and that means prioritizing attendance. We know that youth who do not complete high school are 4.5 times more likely to experience homelessness than those who do graduate. So education is a critical intervention in preventing homelessness. On the next slide, we'll share some national data with you. So this slide shows the national chronic absent rates for the 22-23 school year, which is the most recent that we have available. It may not surprise you to see that the chronic absent rate for students experiencing homelessness is 20 percentage points higher than for all students. But we should all take note of the 12 percentage point difference between students who are homeless and other low-income students. Clearly, homelessness itself has a unique impact on attendance that's over and above poverty because the lack of a safe and stable home and all that goes with it create unique barriers. On the next slide, we see the exact same pattern for high school graduation rates with a 13 percentage point difference between homeless students and other low-income students. Nothing about these statistics is inevitable. And you'll hear from our panelists, school districts can make progress and they are closing the gaps. Our students have tremendous potential and it's up to us to remove those barriers to success. On the next slide, just a quick refresher, again, understanding that we're bringing our worlds together, our McKinney Vento homeless world and our attendance world together. So we just want to provide a very brief refresher on how federal law helps us do just that, how it helps us remove barriers to the success of children and youth who are homeless. So again, for those of you who don't live and breathe homeless education every day, the McKinney-Vento Act is a federal education law that provides a broad mandate for all school districts to review and revise policies and practices that act as barriers to enrollment and retention, and it specifically calls out barriers that are related to attendance. Some other key features, it includes a requirement for all school districts to designate a liaison for homeless students to coordinate those district efforts and with 10 specific duties in the law. There's a requirement for immediate enrollment, which is defined as attending classes and participating fully in school activities. So there's another key reference to attendance in the law. And a requirement for stability, the right to stay in the same school if it's in a child's best interest and to receive transportation so that school can be an oasis of stability when everything else in a child's life is turned upside down. We provided a link to a quick reference for more information for those of you for whom this is new. And on the next slide, we want to share that as part of this project, we asked the 65 young people who are part of our Youth Leadership and Scholarship Program to share their insights on attendance. What made it hard? What helped? And what could have been done better? Their wisdom is provided on the landing page for this project on our website, but I wanted to share one statement in particular that I thought really powerfully sums up the challenges. So for this student, she said, I would say that my 3 biggest barriers to consistently attending school while experiencing homelessness were transportation, priorities, and support. Without a car and constantly couch surfing, I couldn't rely on a bus to pick me up and drop me off. When I learned that I could receive bus cards, I still had to walk to and from where the buses would stop, and inclement weather almost always made it feel impossible to start the day on a positive note. In terms of priorities, I was always trying to balance work and school, but work was essential for my survival, while school felt less crucial. It would have been helpful if teachers had been more understanding of the challenges I was facing. I want to tell you that this student will finish her first year of college this year. She is bound for greatness, but like so many of our students, she continues to carry the trauma of the barriers that she faced, which made her path needlessly more difficult. So we're very excited to share with you how we can all do better for the 1.4 million students who are going through similar experiences. And with that, I turn it back over to Hetty.
Thank you so much, Barbara. And what a powerful story, and a story of hope of how we can all make a difference. So it is our pleasure to invite districts who we had the chance to go and learn about what they were doing. Henrico County, Adams 12, Coalinga-Huron, Kansas City, Kansas. These are 4 districts that you can actually see the in-depth profiles. We're actually going to be joined by 3 of them for this webinar, and many of you know this is a 2-part series. Anna Sophia will end with a little more information about the 2-part series, but for the second webinar, that's a follow-up, everyone from these districts and Coalinga-Huron will be also joining us. You should see we picked these districts because all of them could demonstrate a real reduction in the chronic absence rates among the students who are homeless. They vary, however, in size, which is good news because it means we know you can do this in any kind of setting, regardless of size, regardless of whether you're urban, suburban, or rural. If you go to the next slide, it is my pleasure to be able to invite our panelists to talk with us. So we're going to be joined by Jessica Smith, who's the McKinney Vento coordinator from Kansas City, Kansas. Lori Bailey, who's the director of student engagement initiatives from the Adams 12 5-star schools, which is in Colorado. And she will also be joined by Liesl Reed, who is the whole child's initiative coordinator for the student engagement initiatives in Adams 12 5-star schools. And we will also be joined by Lisa Ann Abernathy, who is with the Henrico County Public Schools. So you are in treat for, you are in going to experience an incredible treat. They're an incredibly engaging group of panelists. And if we go to the next slide, I just want to give you a little bit of a sense of the kind of questions we're going to explore in this panel. First, we're going to start by asking each district to tell us about their what led them to focus on reducing chronic absence for students experiencing homelessness and who's involved. Then we'll ask them to talk about 1 to 2 key strategies, but know that we can't possibly do justice to the amazing work they're doing, and you can use the case studies to find out more. And then we're going to ask them for advice. What would they offer other districts and suggest other districts can do given their own rich experiences? So with that, I am going to ask Liesl from Adams 12 to start us off. Tell us about what led Adams 12 to do this work and who's involved.
Thanks, Hetty. Well, just like all school districts throughout the nation, we saw an all-time high in chronic absenteeism following the pandemic. We know that highly mobile students were especially vulnerable to the pandemic and were more likely to we were more likely to lose track of them. But we were also seeing really positive things in our school district, like increase in graduation rates for highly mobile youth, decrease in dropout rates. And so we knew we had just immense amount of skill, knowledge, and talent in our school district, along with senior staff and a board of education and superintendent that really support all of the innovation that we come up with. And I think that's because they know what McKinney Vento is. We raise awareness, we raise knowledge of what McKinney Vento is, as Barbara said. It can be an invisible problem, and so helping people understand not only what it is, but how it impacts a student's access to learning is crucial. We have that supportive senior staff decision makers who really allow us to be innovative. And part of that innovation has been to really make sure that groups of students who qualify as highly mobile, so that includes students who experience homelessness, but also students who are involved in the child welfare system, who are identified as migrant, who are newcomers to the country, immigrants, refugees, evacuees. In many school districts, including our own several years ago, these were spread out to different offices, even though many of these students span these designations. A migrant student is often experiencing homelessness. An immigrant student is often experiencing homelessness. Sometimes students involved in child welfare are or become unaccompanied homeless youth. And so we were able to move all of those offices under one umbrella. And it really helped the prevention of, I think, sometimes what's competition for resources, because we now have all the resources under one umbrella. And so we can serve those communities as a whole. So we do have specialization in our office. We have an unaccompanied homeless youth advocate, a migrant youth advocate, child welfare, educational liaison, but we also engage everyone in our school district. And that includes people you may not even think of, like in our finance department that help us manage grants, in our IT department that provide mobile hotspots and help us with enrollment. And through Homeless Youth Awareness Month in November, we lift up these other offices and help our entire system understand how every single of the 6,000 employees in Adams 12 contributes to removing barriers for students that are experiencing homelessness.
Thank you, Lisa. So it sounds like when you say all under one umbrella, you created a single department where you all are working together as a team.
That is
And
correct.
you have a very strategic approach to making sure that everyone else in the district thinks of themselves as part of your team.
Yes.
All right. Lisa Ann, tell us about Henrico.
Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. So when we started looking at data for chronic absenteeism, what we saw was that our students who were homeless were chronically absent at more than 2.5 times the rate of their stably housed peers in Henrico. And when we started diving into what could possibly make a difference and how we could assist these students, we found that there were definitely evidence-based strategies proven to mitigate attendance concerns. One such strategy being a system in place that had an intentional position focused on being responsive to the unique circumstances that students who are homeless experience. So we started diving into the Title IV arena, and we started reading all the different areas in there. What could I latch onto and write a grant to help us get that person on board? So we wrote it for a position for someone who had an MSW degree, someone who was connected to and experienced in navigating both community-based and school-based resources. And we wanted this position, we wrote it so that the person would be dedicated to building relationships, because relationships are foundational in everything we do. Build relationship with students, families, and school personnel, identify the barriers, and then equip our families and our students with the tools and resources that would help get our students to school. When you talk about working across silos, our Director of Federal Programs and Foundational Learning, Tina Alsop, was a huge champion for us. As I was writing the grant for the Title IV piece, she looked at ESSER funding that we had, and she wrote a grant. And she actually sent me an email. She said, please don't be mad at me. I'm writing a grant to add to your team. And I'm like, yes, thank you. But what she knew is if we were going to have somebody on board specifically dedicated to connecting families to resources, to mentoring our students, to building relationships, then we needed a person on board that was going to cultivate those community partnerships and bring in the resources. So we put 2 grants together, and now we have a pretty dynamic team with whom I am fortunate enough to work.
Thank you so much. I'm going to just note, Lisa Ann, that I know people are going to wonder, How are you going to support that team as we're seeing ESSA funds, other thing ending? So be prepared. We are going to have Q&A, and but I want to keep that up in mind. We'll come back to that question, and it'll be a question for all of you. Jessica, tell us about how this got started in Kansas City, Kansas, and who's part of your team.
So first of all, shout out to all the McKinney Vento liaisons. I see you in the chat room. Yay. So it's really hard to pinpoint what exactly led to just this focus. My focus is always on improving outcomes for McKinney Vento students, and Naomi's focus is always on improving attendance with a shared focus on getting kids to graduation. Naomi Talentino is the coordinator for student support services, with her focus being on attendance and our Attend to Achieve. So she is really the huge champion for attendance in our district along with her team. And I'm the huge champion for McKinney Vento students along with my team. My team consists of 2 program specialists that we were able to hire within the last 3 years that specifically carry a caseload of our unaccompanied youth at a high school level. And since those positions have existed, we have tripled our numbers of identified unaccompanied youth. Because we're identifying them and able to provide transportation and different supports, of course, their attendance has improved. Because of our great relationship and our coordination, we realized the importance of adding the McKinney Vento component when Naomi and her team was developing the systematic changes to improve attendance. So that was a great help. We still have a long way to go, but we're proud of the strides we're making, where we make sure to incorporate McKinney Vento students into the systematic changes that are happening to improve our attendance, not just focusing on the overall attendance, but also particular populations like McKinney Vento that may struggle in a different way.
So Jessica, let's build off what you were giving us that context to talk about what's a key strategy that you're seeing really making a difference?
I would say that one of the major strategies is the relationship building. You'll hear me talk a lot about relationship building. My team ensures that the registrars and the attendance clerks not only know that me and my team exist, but they know they have a better understanding of McKinney Vento and how that can affect attendance of students. We accomplish this through PDs. We go into buildings. We conduct PDs in the buildings. We have done PDs with our nutritional services. We've done the professional development with transportation. We speak at new employee orientation. We also want to make sure that schools are doing an attendance plan. When they're doing the attendance plan for the McKinney Vento students, that the McKinney Vento staff is involved in that. So I would say like the largest strategy is not just the systematic change, but the relationships, making sure that staff know we exist, making sure that they know we are here to support them, and also with community-based organizations going to present and do professional development with some of the oddest things like the hotel management, make sure they know that McKinney Vento exists. All these things, doing support for our families and our students add to the attendance rates.
You know, Jessica, I think it's relationship, but you also said something about a student attendance plan, and it feels
Yes.
like what you're doing is you're building the relationships so that when you have a plan for a student, you have everyone who needs to be there, willing
Right.
to be there to then support that plan. So the attendance plan includes knowledge of what the challenges and struggles they're facing around homelessness, might involve even the hotel manager, but you're building the relationships so you can work together, and then you're concretely actually expressing what that is through your student attendance plan.
Absolutely. Yeah, we because of the relationships, as you said, because of those relationships, when the attendance clerk or the social worker in the building or the counselor in the building is beginning to develop that attendance plan, they're like, oh, this baby is McKinney Vento. Let's have a conversation with Jessica or someone on our staff to make sure that we have everything aligned.
All right. Thank you, Jessica. Lisa Ann.
So when we started diving into that data, another thing that we noticed, about 4 to 6 weeks into the school year, we would have an influx of students come in who had previously been no-shows for that school year. The other thing that we saw in looking at attendance data was we had, at the time of identification, 10% of our students were already chronically absent before McKinney Vento could step in and offer support. In addition to that, another almost 4% were within 3 to 5 days of being chronically absent, that time frame that it typically takes to even get transportation up and running for them. So those pieces together really told us we needed to focus on early identification. And we took that proactive stance from like a multi-pronged approach. First, we wanted to get ahead of it before the one school year even ended. So we started by sending out year-end letters, kind of wrap-up letters to all of our families, just giving them kind of an idea and some information of what the following school year would look like. Like if they had rising 6th or 9th graders, if they had become stably housed, if they felt they were still experiencing homelessness. We worked to put all of the information in those letters that they would need to be connected to the proper school or proper school division for the upcoming school year. You can well imagine that when you send out 1,300 letters, you're going to get several of them back. And when our social worker first came on board, our attendance-focused social worker, the first thing she did was reach out to those families for whom we had received return letters. And it wasn't a, where are you? Why did your mail come back? Why don't we have your updated address? It was like, hey, how are you? We're looking forward to next school year. What are your visions? What are your dreams? What are your needs? How are you set for next school year? She started by building those relationships. And then it could be, hey, where are you? We have some information that we want to share. We were really focused on professional development, not just McKinney Vento 1, but what homelessness looks like in the classroom, accommodations that help mitigate those challenges, what it looks like to build a learner-centered community, the importance of relationships in making students feel like they are welcomed and they belong. And then also, what does it look like when you take a non-punitive approach to instruction? One of the biggest things we did, though, was we call them our summer pop-ups. This coming July will be our 4th year doing them, but we pop up in the hotel parking lots around our division. We do 3 a year. And basically, it's a backyard family cookout. We've got music and games and dancing and food and an ice cream truck and 25 vendors from around the community and within our school division that offer support and resources to our families. And what we do there is we actually we are very intentional about how we move people through and how they access everything that's at these pop-up events, at our family backyard events in the parking lot. First thing, they meet our eligibility team. So they come right on site, they fill out the eligibility paperwork. We have eligibility conversations right there. We do needs assessments right there to kind of determine, are there clothing and shoes needs? Are there transportation needs? How can we assist? If students are brand new to our division, we enroll them right on site. And then we kind of, if they were with us before, and they had a rough time attendance-wise, we do a gentle turnover to our social worker who has a conversation of, tell me how you feel like the school year went. What can we do to make this year even better? What are your goals? What do you want to achieve? At these events, we invite our sister divisions to come and join us because the lines in our area, the crossover, one toes in one division, one toes in another. And our students in our hotels could be in one of 3 divisions. So they come and join us and do the same things there for their families. And then when our students leave, they're enrolled. They've got the transportation requests already set up. They've got their supplies. They've got all kinds of other resources. And they've met folks from their school community and their school division with whom they know they're going to have a relationship for support.
That's so fantastic, Lisa. I love the notion of using data to identify where you can take steps to prevent, as well as the relationship building theme is clearly coming through both between the people who need to support families, but between the families and the folks who could support them. That is fantastic. I want to just put a little note. Both Jessica and Lisa, you're being asked for examples of your resources. So we can also make sure this happens as part of the follow-up. But Jessica, what attendance plan looks like, and Lisa Ann, what your year-end letters look like. People would really love to see those. With that, Adams 12, please tell us what are your what are a couple key strategies?
Yes, I mean, it's already been referenced so many times, but relationships. With a district like Adams 12 that is so large and 5% of our student population is considered highly mobile, we cannot do it all ourselves in the highly mobile office. And so we look at how can we use all the talent, skills, and knowledge across the school district? And so one model we use is called a single point of contact, which is a model often used in higher ed, where we have a staff member in the school who knows who their McKinney Vento students are, who their child welfare, who their migrant students are, and monitors not only their attendance, but any sort of behavioral needs, academic needs, and then make sure that they get tapped in with our program. And so we don't try to take it all on. We also have wraparound facilitators in our schools. Even if we don't have an official, call them SPOCs in our schools, we have identified people that are really our liaisons. And so that can be family liaisons at our title schools. It can be our wraparound facilitators, which we affectionately call our waffles. We have our single points of contact. We have mentors. And so we have a mentorship program where unaccompanied homeless youth are paired with mentors and they get independent study credit towards graduation. And so we just have all these eyes and ears everywhere with a direct connection back to our program. And then I think just we're always innovating. We are never satisfied. And we are going to take away examples that Lisa Ann gave and Jessica gave. We actually went to KCK a few years ago, and we're always innovating. And part of that innovation is not just thinking about what prevents students from going to school, but also what gets them to school. And so we do use grant funds to make sure that if a student wants to compete in sports, that they have the equipment they need, that the registration fee is not a barrier for them, because we know that extracurriculars, athletics, clubs, that's what gets kids to school. That's what motivates them to perform well academically. It's what gives them hope for post-secondary success. And so we don't just look for barriers, but we look for great opportunities for students and families to engage in school.
That's fantastic. Lori, I'm going to start with you to start off this question about what advice would you offer to other districts? So thinking and reflecting upon what's worked in Adams 12, what advice would you give to districts, maybe particularly those just starting out?
Thanks for that question, Hetty. I think the biggest piece of advice that we would give is just think about the work and addressing this challenge in concentric circles. So I'll start about thinking about an internal strategy. So think about every single office and department and division in your school district. So think about, how can you leverage IT? How do you partnership with nutrition services? How are you partnering with safety and security? Because at some point, you're going to want to lean on those partners to help you engage in this work. We also want you to continue to develop relationships with those individuals because they're going to help you identify where your gaps are. You have to be honest about your gaps. This is where we're really good at. This is what we're not very good at. But I know that you are really good at this in your work in transportation. And so we want to partner with you in that space. And then understand the systems within those internal teams as well. So you know who those points of contact are so that you can reach out to them to immediately address challenges. That next circle is about leveraging those external partnerships. Who knows who in the community? Who has additional resources? Who do you have partnerships? Who do you need to develop memorandums of understanding with or contracts with? And think about how you can use those relationships to help where you may have gaps in your system. Also think about partnering with nearby districts. We have a lot of mobility between districts here in Adams 12. We have 5 different municipalities and 2 different counties that we span across. And so we have multiple school districts that are within really close proximity. And so making sure that you have strong and powerful relationships with your out of district partners as well, because there's a good likelihood that you're going to be sharing kids over time. And when you think about braiding all of those things together, that's how you find the ability to blend funds, to capitalize on resources, and to have a greater impact. So really just thinking about each of those concentric circles and how they both work interdependently and dependently on each other so that you can make the greatest impact for kids.
Thank you, Lori. Lisa Ann, what advice would you offer?
Pragmatically, be driven by your data. Check it often. And even though it may not be pretty, it's okay. Use it to evaluate your work, not your worth. And then more importantly, use it to find the places where you need growth. And then don't be afraid to dream big. We have a vision board in my office that spans literally the entire length of a wall. We have this year's program goals, 2 to 5 year goals, 3+ year goals. There is no idea that is not worthy to be on the board, no matter how big it is, no matter how outlandish it is, no matter how innovative it is, just put it on the board. And then use the data to see, where does this fit in? How is it going to help us address concerns? How's it going to help us move our students forward? Don't be afraid to dream. Don't be afraid to ask for things. Don't be afraid to be persistent in your asks and searching for partners and funding and things like that. And don't be afraid to build a plane in the air, because sometimes when you're innovating on the fly. And if you're using your data to evaluate your work, if things aren't working, you can pivot, and that's okay. But sometimes even before you just got to build a plane and go. That might be the only way to get there.
And Lisa, there's a question from one of the participants about, if you're just starting to generate reporting and assessment of attendance data, and how it relates to homelessness, are there particular data points? Is there a particular place to start around the data?
The first thing I would do is find out what your division is already collecting. We have a very robust, rich department of research and assessment. And so we tap in to what the division already looks at and tracks, right? But for us, it was really like we look at, what do students have when they first come into us? What are their increases in attendance? Gosh, we
And
look
even
at
just starting, I guess, by knowing how many of your chronically absent kids are homeless, what's the attendance rates for your kids who are homeless, might be two initial data points.
Absolutely. And if you tap in with your division on what they're already paying for, you could pretty easily track that or find that data, pull that data, instead of having to worry about tracking it yourself. They're probably they have a robust system in place to look at that already. That's the first thing.
Jessica, what advice would you offer?
So I had a whole thing filled out, but this conversation is so great, and seeing all the questions is so great. But one of my biggest things, as I said before, was communication. Communication with your buildings. I think with liaisons, we tend to, when you talk about McKinney Vento very specifically, we're kind of the redheaded stepchild over in the corner, and people don't know we exist. And so communication with the buildings is the best, not just with administrators, not just with the building principals, but creating that relationship with your frontline people. I bow down to all our secretaries, all our front desk staff. They are amazing. They know all the things. And that is one of the biggest things that we do, is make sure our communication is up so they know we exist and they know what resources we have. And to, like Lisa said, you dream big and you find innovative and different things. Naomi is doing an attendance thing from March 24th to April 30th. It's another campaign because our numbers go low. So we're jumping on the piggyback of that campaign with our transportation service. So if our students don't have any no-shows, they get entered into a raffle and they win a prize. And that just adds on to what she's already doing. Adding on to what already exists is wonderful. And our transportation service is donating the raffle prizes because we give them lots of money. So you need to do something for me. So those things, those communications, those relationships with our community-based organizations, we make sure that everyone knows what McKinney Vento is. We're very, very loud. And in doing so, we create that relationship with everybody that has to do with attendance in our district. And making sure that they just know we're here as a resource, and we piggyback on all the stuff. Like Lisa said, our systems tend to not track McKinney Vento stuff well, but if you ask the right questions, they can build the right things you need to track that data. McKinney Vento liaisons, you just got to ask.
All right, thank you. Barbara, I would like you to join and talk about some of the key takeaways we found when we looked across these districts, as well as some of the other districts that we interviewed.
Yes, so we, in addition to the case studies of the 4 districts, which have many, many, many more rich details about all the wonderful practices that you've been hearing about, We also summarized the main takeaways and strategies into a handy summary. We pulled out 10 strategies that we heard repeatedly from districts across the country. So I just want to quickly summarize some of them here, which have already been very eloquently expounded upon earlier by our panelists. You heard Lisa Ann and everybody else talk about understanding the baseline data and incorporating that homelessness data into whatever platform or dashboard that you already have. If we're not intentional about tracking the progress of homeless students, we won't know how they're doing. And we also won't know if homeless students are actually benefiting from generalized district-wide initiatives. So data is always a great place to start. You've also heard from across the panel how important it is to work across those various departments, not just to homelessness and attendance, but all the other school finance, transportation, school nutrition, all of that. So for our attendance professionals who are with us today, do you know your McKinney Vento liaison? Do you know the homeless services provided by the district and by the community? For our McKinney Vento liaisons, do you know who your attendance lead is and how to share your data and service with them? We know funding is a huge issue. We spend a lot of time talking and working about funding, and each of the case studies provide great examples of how they mix public and private funding to support their efforts. Do you know how much your school district reserves from Title I Part A for homeless students because it's required by law? How is that funding being used? Where do community school foundations fit in? How might they may be approached? So those are critical questions, particularly at this time of the year when school districts are creating budgets for next year. Each of our featured panels are tapping into community partners to meet the comprehensive needs of students and families who are homeless because schools cannot do it alone. So mapping out shelter, housing, health, after school, childcare, food, and other partners is a core strategy and takeaway. And finally, always, but especially in these times, we must center trust, discretion, and sensitivity in all of our interactions with families and students. We know that fear and shame and stigma may be much less tangible barriers than, say, lack of transportation or hygiene, but they are just as real and we really need to address them. So more on strategies we're going to talk about in part 2 next week. Before we turn to questions, just a couple more pieces. On the next slide, we wanted to make sure that you're aware of a recently launched resource. So we heard a question just now about what data do you start with? Well, there is federally required data collection on students experiencing homelessness, including chronic absence. So this new resource developed with the University of Michigan Poverty Solutions allow you to explore that data at the state, county, school district level, as well as state and congressional legislative districts. On the next slide, just to share that we do have a specific pullout for chronic absenteeism and homelessness data that allows users to compare those rates within a state. And then there's another tab that allows you to look at trends over time. So again, it's 22-23 school year data, goes back 4 years, but at least gives you some information on the numbers, living situation, and chronic absent rates. So that's a great tool for you to have. And with that, I think, Hetty, I turn it back over to you to help us get the questions.
I've been seeing some of the questions. I want to start with the sustainability question because that started coming up quick, and I'm actually going to turn to you, Lisa Ann. So you talked about these combining 2 different grants. One was ESSER. How are you thinking about sustainability now that we're in a bit of a different financial climate?
So we are very fortunate that the relationship with our Title I team, we serve in federal programs and foundational learning. That's the department that we're in. And that relationship has always been rich. And when we wrote the one grant, when Ms. Alsop wrote the one grant for our community resources person off of ESSER, she was already thinking ahead. And so that transitioned very smoothly in to Title IV. And so now both of those positions are Title IV. So we're all funded from we have a state.
So from the beginning, even when you created new positions, you already were thinking about what the sustainable funding stream was going to be, even if you started it with a different, less permanent funding stream.
Absolutely. And our summer pop-ups was the same thing. We took those from our American Rescue Plan funds. But I didn't want to do something that I had to worry about. Could I ever do this again if it works? I wanted to invest in my program instead and grow the program. So right at the forefront, you're always thinking about sustainability. And I already had a plan in mind on where I was going to transition that funding to.
Excellent. Anyone else have any other advice about this sustainability?
I wanted to piggyback on what Lisa said. That's exactly what we did with my 2 new positions, Lisa. As soon as we hired them and they were hired out of ESSER funds, we went ahead and piggybacked and we found other ways. So the exact same way, I would just recommend that as soon as you figure out what you want to do, you begin to think about how we're going to sustain that. And you ask your grant writers.
I would also add, look for opportunities, grant or funding opportunities that maybe aren't like your first thought. So your public health departments, education is a social determinant of health. Look at Department of Justice. We're writing a big grant for mentorship to prevent school violence that will help UHY by connecting them to mentors. So as you're thinking about your work, think way beyond maybe your state's availability for McKinney Vento grants to things that would be considered innovative and draw funders.
So another issue that's come up is the question around transportation, and it's come up in a number of different questions. One person saying, boy, the kids who don't have their transportation and plans, we're almost making them chronically absent because we don't address it early. But then there's questions about how do you fund and support transportation, given that transportation is such a challenge for kids who are experiencing homelessness. Anyone want to weigh in on how you address transportation needs?
Well, it looks very different. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Lisa and I just really go in, don't we? It looks I would say it looks very, very different for each district. And you must appeal to the people who are setting aside general funds and different funds. I will say in our district, I don't have the issue of people who control some of those funds not understanding the importance of transportation. I think that one of the biggest things is making sure that the people who are controlling some of the larger dollars in general funds and your set aside funds understand the importance and what the law states. Oftentimes they don't understand what the law very specifically states, and they're like, oh, we don't have to provide transportation, but that's not what the law says. So I would say for me, and I stir up stuff, but for me, I would like to say that understanding that what the law says is very important. Having someone in your corner that controls that budget, that understands what the law states, not your opinion, but what the law actually states, and what your set aside funds are being used for in your district. If your district actually sets aside a significant amount of funds, if they're being used for transportation, and have a conversation with your transportation department about what they can do within their department alongside of McKinney Vento.
Anyone else to add on this? Otherwise, I have more questions about different topics.
I would add we embarked on sort of a listening tour last year where we reached out to Barbara and to our state coordinator and asked who is doing transportation really well in a suburban district with a large district. And so we got the opportunity to get connected with districts that are similar to ours across the country to collect some really great ideas as we formulate some proposals for our chief operating officer. So again, just constantly seeking out new ways to do things and get over some of those barriers.
All right. So another question is real concerns about the impact of ICE raids and fears of ICE raids on attendance and on immigrants, for immigrant students, and knowing that some of the immigrant kids are actually also homeless. What have you seen? How have you responded? How have you found any things that can address the situation in this very, very challenging time?
I think talking about schools being a welcoming place, a place where students can access food, trusted adults, shelter, warmth, and also having really transparent conversations with parents, having guiding talking points for not only staff, but just our own team has been really helpful, how to have those really difficult conversations with parents about the realities of protected spaces being lifted and of immigration presence. It's really hard. There's no magic answer, but I think the willingness to have those courageous conversations has made a big difference in strengthening relationships between the district and parents or caregivers.
And I don't think we can say it enough. We've heard it over and over today, but I'll stand on it as the foundation of everything, and that's authentic relationships. And you really start to build those from your very first interaction, and not just for us as McKinney Vento liaisons, but when they first walk in a school building, right? And it's having that unified dedication to being welcoming atmospheres, being a climate where folks feel like they belong. And it's all on relationships. And we're fortunate that we have the leadership in Henrico that believes in that too, right? And that's what we try to do with every interaction that we have with our families and our students.
So how do you, as districts, equip the front line of school staff and teachers and all the people who interact daily with kids to build those relationships and really show that compassion, particularly for kids who are homeless, who they might not even realize are homeless? Are there particular strategies that work for ensuring that when a kid comes to school, what they experience is compassionate relationships that makes them want to continue to show up and also share and when they're experiencing challenges?
I would say for us, part of the relationship building is the frontline staff, but our frontline staff got trained. Our DI department before that, yeah, they trained them on very specific things when all the things began to happen. But for us, also the relationship building with our unaccompanied big kids is the staff that we have that go into the building, and the kids know they'll be there on Tuesday at 11 o'clock every time. I think it's the consistency that a lot of times our big kids are no longer seeing in their lives, at the unaccompanied big kids. And so it's the consistency and knowing that this adult said they'll be here at 11 and they will be here at 11 every day. So that builds that relationship of trust for the students to know that this is what's going to happen. This is a trusted adult. I know they'll be here. I know I can depend on them. So I think the adult in their lives just being consistent, and that's what we've done with the program specialist from McKinney Vento.
And Jessica, I think the term unaccompanied actually means something specific in the homeless. Can you just explain what that term means?
So for McKinney Vento, unaccompanied youth is a student that's living without their parent or guardian. So it could be a 5-year-old. A 5-year-old that was dropped off at grandma's house and mama never returned. That could be an unaccompanied youth. My staff, the program specialists, they focus on unaccompanied youth at a high school level who are couch surfing, who are maybe staying at their best friend's house. It's just extremely unstable, so they don't have their own adult. And so our staff is their adult that kind of is there consistently.
Thank you. I just know we have folks coming in from the attendance world, and they might not understand that term. What else?
Well, and speaking of that, Hetty, I'm sorry, but with that unaccompanied part, we are trying very hard to ensure that our unaccompanied, undocumented students that come in, we grasp them so we know that they're there, so we can be that person for them also.
All right. Thank you. Lisa.
Also making sure that we've talked a lot about professional development and professional learning, that it is engaging, that it is experiential, that it really helps people understand why high mobility is so impactful on a youth's access to education. And so, for example, we've done simulations where we give everyone in the audience a different book marked at a different page of different reading levels, and then a list of comprehension questions, and say, I need you to finish this in the next 15 minutes. So to give people that really, like, I'm stepping into the shoes of a child who may be moving around a lot. We found that the McKinney Vento 101 training, especially for school staff that have been around a while, they check out. They're like, yeah, I know what that is. And so our trainers, especially our team leads, Lee and Melissa, have developed just really innovative presentations that engage people to help them truly understand. And then we try to incorporate the same best practices with instruction as instructors do. So I even brought out a Kahoot at a liaison meeting to review some of it. Just really using those best practices to make sure that people can empathize traumatized and therefore are more likely to really have empathy, compassion, and change their practices to create a welcoming environment.
And as you ensure more staff are aware of who's homeless so they can offer these extra supports and treat them with compassion, how do you handle the issue of confidentiality? And that's for any of you, because all of you are engaging in data sharing, having cross-teaming. So this question about confidentiality and how do you ensure that it's respected and supported? Because this is challenging.
I don't want to talk too much, Lisa Ann or Jessica, if you want to chime in here. It's a need to know. It's why does the person need the information? We've had schools reach out and say, can we get a list of homeless students? And our lead McKinney Vento liaison says, why? Well, what do you want to use it for? And so really making sure to do that analysis of why are we giving out this information? Who is it to? And what is it being used for? Of course, we're going to provide our SPOCs with that information because they're monitoring attendance, they're building relationships with families. And so it's really just weighing what the benefit is for us.
So we kind of we say it's a need to know approach as well, but we're a little bit different in that need to know approach because our thought process is if I have somebody who's serving that student and they don't know that the student is homeless, it's kind of like writing an IEP with the best goals and accommodations in the world and then shoving that IEP in a drawer and it does nothing for the student. So we do share, but we are very, very deliberate in our PD, our professional development work on what you do and don't do with that knowledge, right? We don't talk about the housing situation. We don't ask questions to our youth. We don't do that. We use it for our internal knowledge to know, this take-home assignment to put some things on a poster board and color and glue, that may not work for my first grader here who is in a hotel. Or I may not be able to have that reading assignment just on the internet because even though they've got a hotspot, it might still be in and out. So it's a need to know basis, but if you serve a student, you need to know. But I need you then to know how to utilize that information. So we're really deliberate in the PD on that.
Yeah, I would agree with both. Like, I think that almost is a need to know, like, a lot of staff need to know that this student is McKinney Vento, but every staff doesn't need to know the story behind that McKinney Vento, if that makes sense. We used to have a symbol at the top of our information system, was a little purple house that let people know that that student was McKinney Vento. That was the most helpful thing. And yes, everyone could see the little house, but when you're dealing with, when a principal, we could have saved 50 emails if that principal would have just known that student was McKinney Vento. We could have figured out so many things. So it is a need to know, but I think that a lot of times we create a barrier when the staff has to go through all these things to figure out a student was McKinney Vento. So it is very important that they don't have to know that they're living in a hotel or that they switched addresses 10 times in the last 2 months. They don't need to know all of that, but it's important that a lot of staff know this student is McKinney Vento. They know they have a special transportation. They know that this baby may be falling asleep because they didn't have a good place to sleep last night. They know that when they ask for extra food, they mean it.
Jessica, I wonder if this is where the chronic absence data can be helpful. If a kid's not chronically absent, even if they're McKinney Vento, they may have figured out things about how to manage things. So, I mean, but if a kid's chronically absent or failing in grades or having other things that you know, oh, the kid has challenges, then the question could be, or even behavioral issues, where maybe the kid's reacting because they're in a challenging, traumatizing situation and it's just coming out at school. And the question might be, how do schools, when they don't know the kid's McKinney Vento, they know something's amiss. And then how do they then reach back out to figure out, well, maybe either it's a known McKinney Vento issue or it's an unknown McKinney Vento issue. And actually, if someone could build more of a relationship, you'd actually figure out there's some underlying issues that are actually creating the situation.
I think that's why it's so important for every staff member to know what McKinney Vento is, because let's say a student is asking for a lot of food. Every day after lunch, they're like, Miss So-and-so, lunch lady, do you have an extra whatever? And it would be good for that lunch lady to know, well, maybe there's something else going on. So one of us mentioned a point of contact in the building. Then the point of contact might be the social worker in the building. It's not a punitive situation. It's a situation where the lunch lady is concerned. Nutritional services is concerned about this student and going to the social worker and saying, hey, little Jimmy is asking for a lot of food lately. And then the social worker may be looking up the attendance and saying, I see that their attendance has been struggling this month, but it wasn't last month. And calling that parent and saying, hey, we're just a little concerned. And it's all about the compassion and the empathy that we show families instead of always being punitive with it. That's where all that professional development comes in.
So one of the participants says, the district I'm in continuously ignores the McKinney Vento students in my school. Our program is one of their alternative programs, quote unquote alternative. For whatever reason, our school is left out of the McKinney Vento budget and resources. What suggestions could you all give for addressing this issue?
So I guess it would be.
Oh wait, I think Lisa Ann was
Yes,
about to mute. I'm gonna move it around. Go for it, Lisa Ann.
Thank you. I would say don't be afraid to lean into the resources that are there for you, especially with Schoolhouse Connections. There is some powerful stuff in their website alone, not to mention their advocacy work. Like lean into the people who can have a little more speech from above, right? Pull in your experts to start talking about why it's important and asking them to help you take data and use that data to show to your division why this is important. Your state coordinator is probably a great resource to lean in on as well.
All right, I'm going to go through just a couple of different questions. Another question is, what strategies do you have for high school students who see their education as secondary, although school attendance barriers have been removed, like transportation or clothing? But whatever's happening, they're seeing the education as secondary.
Our social worker will sit down with those students and start a visioning session, a dream session with them. Back to the relationships, right? Because she's in that building, she's checking on them and she's meeting with them on a regular basis. And when we can still see, because we know, right, the trauma associated with homelessness, their school attendance is secondary completely. Absolutely. And it's hard to have a future vision when you're trying to survive in the moment, right? But and for us to sit there as adults and say, I just need you to focus on the future, it doesn't work. But if we start to dig a little bit deeper and ask those questions, because we've built a relationship, tell me about your dream. Tell me about where you see yourself. Tell me about what you want to do. Tell me about your vision, right? Tell me about your gifts. Tell me about your strengths, and then help attach those pieces to the education and how that moves them forward. Like the needle's going to move slowly, but little seeds grow into big trees.
I also wonder, Liesl, because sort of your comment about finding out what motivates kids to come, which might not be the big dream for their future because they're not so sure about their future, whether there's something connected to the strategies that you've been using to figure out what motivates kids.
Yes, I mean, one of our biggest strategies that we implemented in the 1920 school year, which talk about a really strange school year, was we carved out grant funds to bring on an unaccompanied homeless youth advocate, so somebody who's dedicated to unaccompanied homeless youth. That really helped in that relationship space, in somebody being able to sit down with them. And I think our version of that visioning is that when we meet with students, we run through a series of questions that is like their own self-assessment that helps them assess what we know as adults are their social emotional competencies, but they're answering questions more about, various things like how do I work through frustration, et cetera. And then we work up to the what do you want to do? And the other thing is that students who are disengaged in school, we try to do a deeper dive into what that actually means. And do they not have a trusted adult in the building? We know that trusted adults are one of the biggest indicators of success in school graduation. And so our mentorship program has been really impactful as well. And we've seen our graduation rate just between last year and this or the year before rise 10 percentage points. So we're at 74% graduation rate for highly mobile youth. And a lot of that has to do with connecting them with an advocate and then this mentorship program where they have a trusted adult. So I think sometimes we underestimate how important having that connection in the building is, and that adult can work with a student to improve. And so not like trying to get them to pass every class or get to every class, but these slow steps that are achievable that can get them there eventually is really important. When, we were in Little Rock, I said, chronic absenteeism isn't the end of the conversation. It's just the beginning. It's not the end of the world. It just gives us an opportunity and an opening to connect with kids.
Thank you. And Liesl and I had the pleasure of being at a conference together in Little Rock. Absolutely. One question was about cyber school and virtual learning. Do any of you have advice about how your work translates into a virtual learning cyber school space?
I think this, like, attendance as a whole is just such a difficult challenge to solve. And by creating those pro-social opportunities during the school experience for our kids that are in a virtual school where possible is really important as well. Whether it be opportunities to come in for academic support at a physical location, whether it be social activities at the roller skating rink, things like that, but creating those opportunities for kids to network and do something that is academically connected, but not necessarily a direct relation, is really, really important. And so finding ways that are creative to ensure that our kids have those opportunities, and then how we get kids to those opportunities if they have barriers such as transportation or finances or something like that. But just really being creative and making it that that opportunity where kids want to be there, where they have the opportunity to foster relationships and make connections is really, really critical.
Thank you, Lori. Anyone else? I want to then shift, and Barbara, I would like you to help respond to this question. There has been a question about what is the impact of the current situation with the DOE on McKinney, Vento, and homeless kids. Could you speak to that?
I will do my best. So I'm sure folks are aware, if your eyes are open and your ears are open and you're watching the news, that a few days ago, the administration fired over 1,300 people from the U.S. Department of Education. It's about a third of its workforce. Fortunately, the staff who run the homeless education program were not fired. They remain in place. And so they are there. The U.S. Department of Education has very specific legal responsibilities for McKinney Vento on data, on administering the grants, on providing technical assistance, on producing guidelines and reports. So our concern is that the lack of capacity in other areas will still make it difficult for those responsibilities to actually be carried out. So lots of things are happening. Just earlier today, 21 states brought a suit about those firings, and we'll see what happens there. But we do know that the staff who lead our homeless education team are intact.
Thank you. Do any of the panelists have anything else to kind of offer about your experience or how you're weathering these pretty chaotic times in terms of what's happening around our federal investments? So I'm going to shift because we're kind of going close out. As you think about what keeps you motivated and hopeful to keep this work going on, just a sentence or so. These are trying times. I think we all need to find ways to stay strong and keep doing the work. What is that for you personally? And I just love for all of the five of you to just share what's something that keeps you going, keeps you hopeful, keeps you working, even when times are tough?
We go back to, we say often, celebrate it all, even the smallest little things. And so we keep text messages from parents, we keep pictures from students, we keep thank you cards from staff, and we will often go back to that, because as long as your purpose and your why is clearly defined and you recognize every minute portion of success as being very impactful, you will continue to understand that what you do is important, and focus in the moment, be present, be right here, and just keep making that change that you were meant to make.
Our superintendent has charged us over the last several years to know our students and families and staff by name, strength, and need. And that has really, really resonated throughout our district. And one of the ways that we continue that work happening is by celebrating small wins. And so even at various meetings and professional learning opportunities, we have some really intentional structures about celebrating those small wins. And one of my favorite ways that we do that in Adams 12 is that at the beginning of a meeting, you might write down your small win, and then we get up and mix up the room. And so Liesl and I might share each other's small wins, but then she gives me her small win and I give her mine. And then she goes and tells my story to somebody else and I tell her story to somebody else. And so we're not only sharing our own stories, we're sharing the stories of others, which just really generates a really positive energy in the room and gives people great ideas for other ways that they can find small wins in their work as well.
I love that. Small wins and name, strength, and need in terms of knowing what's happening with your families. Liesl, do you want to go next, and then we'll let Jessica wrap us up?
I'm going to answer from a very personal lens and get emotional. It's my team. When you walk into our office, you might hear any one of over 12 languages being spoken. You'll never meet 15 more dedicated individuals, all underpaid, all overworked, who just inspire me every day.
Jessica?
Mine is quite personal. Also, I grew up in this school district. When I became a social worker, I became a social worker because of the social worker in my high school. When I came onto this, I didn't know what McKinney Vento was. And it was just little old me and 900 students and 500 families. And the fact that my mother went to her high school reunion of 45 years, and somebody, or however long she's been in school, y'all longer than that, and somebody said to her, Jessica Smith is your daughter? She's doing amazing things with the school district. And it's not because I'm not humble, I'm extremely humble, but my mother's smile really meant a whole lot that night. And all the kids that smile at us and all the small things. I remember my first year, we put a family in a hotel and a little girl hugged my leg really tight. She was about 6. And I said, thank you, baby. What's that for? And she said, because you gave me a bed tonight. It's those little tiny small things. None of us are sitting here on this because we want a big parade or anything like that. It's the tiny hugs. It's the tiny smiles. It's the mothers knowing their kids are safe tonight. So that's why.
You're bringing tears to my eyes, Jessica. All right. With that, Anna Sophia, you get to wrap us up.
That is a tough act to follow, I have to admit. The good news is I think you have inspired us all. I think every single person on this call today will say, my source of joy today is everything that you all have shared. This is not easy work by any means, and you all are handling it with such grace and are doing such an amazing job. And I just want to say that from the bottom of all of our hearts, thank you for what you've shared. And preemptive thank you, because this is part 1 of a 2-part series. And so we are next week on March 18th at 1 p.m. Eastern, we will be having part 2 of our 2-part series. And so we'll have an even deeper dive, talk through some of this. I know there are a ton of questions that came in that we just did not have a chance to get through. And so encourage you all to please come to our second our part 2 of this webinar series. And then I also just wanted to share that when you all sign off today, you will get a pop-up on your screen that has an evaluation survey. And we've specifically included a question for you all to tell us if there's something that you would like us to address, whether it's a specific question that we didn't get to or a topic that you want to hear more about. Really, the purpose of this is to be really interactive and to hear from you all and be responsive to your needs. So please make use of that. We want to hear from you all. And with that, I will also just wrap us up with a couple of things about both of our organizations. So I will start with SchoolHouse Connection. As Barbara shared in the beginning of our webinar, we have a phenomenal scholarship program where we support our young scholars not only with financial support through the scholarship, but also case management. And so if you know of any students who have experienced homelessness within the last 6 years, we encourage you to share this opportunity with them. It is open now and the applications will close on June 2nd. So there's still plenty of time to share that. And we would love to see your students be a part of our program and share their lovely wisdom with our national audience as well. So please share that out widely. Sorry. Sorry about that. It always does that. Okay. And then also just want to share a couple of additional resources specifically around some of the questions that we have been receiving at SchoolHouse Connection about our EHCY program, our grant program that supports students and youth experiencing homelessness under the McKinney-Vento Act. So again, as Barbara stated, what we know at this moment is that the McKinney-Vento Act is still in place, and we encourage you all to read through some of this, share this widely. Our students still need your support, and so we want to know that we're listening to you, we are being responsive to your needs and your questions, and we also engage in federal and state policy advocacy. And so if you have any questions around how to get involved, what to do, please reach out to us. We have a phenomenal policy team who's willing to support you and engage you in any kind of advocacy efforts that you might be interested in. This is just a little bit about where to find us. So we are on all of the socials, on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, YouTube, and of course our Slack, SHC community on Slack. So again, a great place for you all to connect with each other. I saw some lovely connections in the chat already happening, but this is another space for you all to just learn from one another. Again, McKinney-Vento professionals or attendance professionals alike, you're welcome to join. And there are no silly questions. We're all here for you in that space. Again, just want to flag that we have a newsletter as well. And so if you have any specific questions or just want to be updated with what we're doing, know about our legislative updates, please feel free to sign up for that newsletter. And again, we will be in your inbox with all of the updates that we're able to share. And of course, this work would not be possible if it was not for Attendance Works and their partnership. So again, want to thank them for just really giving us all of their lovely expertise around everything attendance. And of course, we want you all to also be connected with them. And so please sign up for their newsletters. They are often sharing evidence-based practices, free downloadable resources, success stories, and just anything related to news and research. And of course, I know that they have an upcoming attendance awareness campaign. And so I'm not sure if Hetty or anyone else wants to share a little bit about that.
A word about that. So we're just about to launch our 2025 campaign. The logo or slogan this year is here today, ready for tomorrow. And we're going to have 4 different webinars. The first one is on April 2nd. It's going to be about the power of teams. The second is going to be about health, well-being, and safety as a key route to improving attendance. The third is going to be, which will be the second one is in May. The third one in August is on student connectedness. And the fourth in September is going to be on family engagement and how that's a tool for improving attendance. So you can, if you sign up for the newsletter, you will get information about all the webinars, and those are all free, as well as all the resource materials that we have that help you all launch attendance awareness campaigns in your own communities.
Great. Thank you so much, Hetty. I think we will all be signing up for those to hear more about that. So with that, I just want to, again, thank everybody for taking the time. I know it's a very busy time. There's lots going on. And again, just want to thank our lovely panelists. Thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you for sharing your expertise. And we would not be able to do this work without you. So thank you. And thank you all. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, whether it's morning, afternoon, but thank you again.